r/AskReddit by Redmond Dtes. What's an adult confession you'd never tell your family? Wife and I were swingers for a time. Went to a large weekend party. At one point, we see my parents checking in. Needless to say, we made a quick exit. That's one hell of a year. I guess I have a lot in common with my folks. I was a stripper for 2 years. Paid cash for college. 25 years later, no one knows. My buddy Jake invited me to his church's trivia night, and I figured, sure, I'll pretend to know Bible stuff if it means I get unlimited slices of pepperoni. Things were going great until one trivia question asked, "What's the fastest growing Christian denomination?" Being the self-proclaimed king of useless knowledge, I muttered, "Probably the Mormons. Those guys are grinding harder than a Call of Duty streamer." Turns out, I was right. Pastor Dan, the youth pastor, overheard me and started asking questions like I was some Mormon historian. Now I'm not Mormon, but thanks to a deep dive into Wikipedia, after watching the Book of Mormon musical, I had random facts locked and loaded. So I started rambling about Joseph Smith, golden plates, and how Mormons don't do coffee, but somehow still have the energy of caffeinated squirrels. Apparently Pastor Dan was fascinated. He started asking me more questions, and since my brain is 80% trivia facts and 20% anxiety, I just kept going. I figured he'd forget about it. Fast forward a few weeks, Jake tells me Pastor Dan has been deeply researching Mormonism. Like, full on studying their theology, reading the Book of Mormon, and apparently vibing with it. Then last week, Jake drops this bomb. "Dude, Pastor Dan just announced he's converting." I went to church for free pizza and accidentally built a Mormon. Had a summer job in college when I was 20. Hooked up with a woman who was 27 and who in hindsight was definitely lying about being separated from her husband and being on birth control. I was really naive. Next time I came home from college, I found out from my mom that the woman had had a miscarriage, which is weird, because wasn't she separated from her husband? I make my living owning and running a small business that designs and sells custom plushes and apparel. My family thinks I make my money crocheting, and I do make a few bucks here and there from my yarn work, but the absolute vast majority of my income comes from the custom made latex fetish wear and kink gear I produce. That sometimes I wish my parents were divorced so that I could visit my mom without having to see my dad at the same time. I do not believe in God, and I smoked weed with my youth pastor on Wednesday nights when you made me go to church. Shout out to Pastor Dave. I draw furry kink, smut for a living, and make more than I would if I worked full-time retail. I'm my own boss, I work from home, and the clients are generally far kinder than when I worked for firms as a designer. I just tell them I'm a freelance illustrator graphic designer, and I'm working on posting my work online. Me and her ex-girlfriend made porn content on Pornhub years ago and made some money off of it. After we separated, we deleted our account, but some videos were quite popular, and I'm sure they are still floating around somewhere on the internet. The real reason I couldn't afford my motorcycle anymore and had to sell it is because in my new city I didn't have access to that mechanic I was sleeping with before. Sorry, Dad. That I'm broke. My family always talk about how proud they are of me to be where I am, but I have not been to work in months, struggling with ongoing mental struggles, and I'm completely broke and struggling to buy food for myself. That I'm attracted to black women. I come from a racist family. I've been hooking up with a girl who identifies as a lesbian and doesn't really respect men. She feminizes and doms the ever-living daylights out of me. Most of them know I did escorting. Most don't know that the majority of my customers were only middle-aged gay men. I was not out banging tons of hot chicks or only hot mamas. I'd never tell my father that his alcoholic second wife, my first stepmom, came on to me one night when he was out working and she was drunk. I was 15 years old, less than a year after they were married. Well, did anything happen? Because it gets incredibly serious if anything did happen, considering your age at the time. No. I shrank away in shock and hid in my room. Nothing more was ever said. This was 40 years ago. I can hardly believe it's so long. They divorced years ago and she's dead now. I used to hook up with the college girl next door while I was a minor. I pawned my parents' wedding rings. They were divorced already and my mom kept them to pay for college applications and an eighth of sour diesel. It eventually got them to stop having revenge sex because they blamed each other for the ring's absence, and I'm 37 credit hours in, lol. I felt like a little shit for doing it, but god, my parents hate each other till this day and I'm almost finished with my degree. Salubrious as F for me. I found my parents' wills and steamed them open to see which brother gets the most, and yes, the youngest, me, does. Get ready for the fight of your life once they pass. I've seen it many times before. I'm a dad. In the months before lockdown, I was in London for some work and I, 23 male, matched with a woman on Tinder, 27, and we ended up hooking up. To be honest, I did fall for this girl, but after our thing she went quiet for months. Then, 6 months later, by this time during lockdown, I got a message from her confessing she was pregnant and married. She did not want anything from me and explained I was nothing but an unwitting sperm donor. Few months later, I got an anonymous email with a picture of the baby, but have heard nothing since then. After trying my whole life to believe they were decent people that loved me, I realized that my family is a bunch of self-absorbed idiotic assholes that are too afraid to improve themselves for fear of losing their ideas of who they are. I had sex with an exchange student my grandmother was hosting. I was 16, she was 17. A week before she met my uncle, whom she married soon after, thus becoming my aunt. Edit, they are now divorced, and she is a United States citizen and small business owner. The small business is a BDSM shop. That's all, folks. Thank you for watching. If you like videos like this one, why not like and subscribe for more? Have a nice evening.